Hey team, there have been some interesting headlines lately that have a common thread. I'm going to go through some of these and they may sound unrelated, but I promise there's a unifying element here that we're going to dig into. Stick with me. On February 4th, 2022, the founders of the Bored Ape Yacht Club got doxxed against their will and now their real-world identities are known. On February 7th, True Names Limited, the group behind the ENS domain name service for .eth domains, removed former head of operations Brantley Milligan for tweets posted in 2016. When confronted, Milligan stood by his past statements, and the backlash was severe, quick, and terminal to his job with ENS. For better or worse, the world is coming after Joe Rogan, in this case, literally trying to get him canceled, or at least his podcast on Spotify. I can't chronicle the whole ordeal, there's too much, but I'll briefly recap. Rogan came under fire for episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience that challenged some prevailing narratives about COVID-19, inoculations, and institutions managing the response. He apologized.
I think there's a lot of people that have a distorted perception of what I do, maybe based on sound bites or based on headlines of articles that are disparaging. The podcast has been accused of spreading dangerous misinformation. I do not know if they're right. I don't know because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a person who sits down and talks to people and has conversations with them. Do I get things wrong? Absolutely, I get things wrong, but I try to correct them. Whenever I get something wrong, I try to correct it because I'm interested in telling the truth.
Neil Young took his catalog off Spotify in protest, then Joni Mitchell, then Brene Brown, then Neil Young put his music back on Spotify. When all of that didn't get Rogan canceled, old episodes surfaced of him saying the N-word. He said it several times. He again apologized.
It's not my word to use. I'm well aware of that now. My sincere and humble apologies. I wish there was more that I could say.
Then episodes surfaced of him laughing seemingly approvingly at the sexual misdeeds of his friend and guest Joey Diaz. This all played out in a couple weeks. At the end of it all, Rogan still had his show. Spotify did not cancel the most popular podcaster on planet Earth, whose content they have exclusive rights to. Nobody should be surprised by this. More recently, people donating to the Freedom Convoy truckers in Canada had their names and personal information leaked. The Canadian protest, led largely by truckers aimed at ending government mandates surrounding the pandemic, have ballooned into a huge political event and one of the largest protests in Canada's history. Those wanting to support the protest initially sent money via GoFundMe. Those funds were frozen. GoFundMe says they will return the funds. I hope so. Then supporters tried using a site called GiveSendGo. That site got hacked and the personal information of 93,000 donors was leaked. Now the Canadian government is threatening to go after the supporters, people who weren't even at the protest, who were, as the National Review puts it, simply engaging in political dissent. Last I checked, people in Western democracies were still allowed to do that. Right? Okay, all of that news, what does it have in common? Well, without getting too creative, the thing I want to focus on is online identity. We're all pretty used to representing ourselves online, at least in many contexts, with our real-world name and face. I mean, Facebook, the largest and category-defining social network with 3 billion monthly active users, is called Facebook. You're meant to put your actual face front and center, and your real-world name, and if you don't, if you create an account with some silly name and face that you made up, they reserve the right to ban the account. For much of the Web 2 world, web identity was the same as IRL identity, but that wasn't always the case. In an earlier internet age, pre-Facebook, users on forums didn't always, or even usually, use their real-world names. If you're in your 30s or older, think back to your earliest memories of the internet, maybe your first email, or a chat room, or AIM handle, or ICQ. Does anybody remember ICQ? Did you use your real name? Or was it something like GotMilk501 or Cute Church Girl 86 or Pop-Tart Fan 1234? That kind of thing mostly disappeared with the social media of Web 2.0, though not completely, because you know what it does sound a bit like? Pseudonymous Twitter handles, or more likely, Discord. First, let's define terms. Identity is just who you are, the set of personal information indicating a certain individual. Anonymous means people don't know who you are. They're aware of some action or activity that may have taken place, but there's no information about that individual. Could be anybody. But the important word for our vocabulary lesson today, pseudonymous. This is when a real-world identity is not known, but some identifying information is known, along with a persistent reputation and history. Again, this idea is not new, we're just using it in a bit of a different way. Identity exists on a spectrum, and it always has. Nobody ever shares everything about themselves, and some people have always carefully crafted personas. Pen names have existed for hundreds of years. Samuel Clemens wanted people to know him as Mark Twain. Eric Blair wanted to be known as George Orwell. And Theodore Geisel simply wanted kids to call him Dr. Seuss. Stage names are another form of pseudonym. Lady Gaga was born Stephanie Germanotta. Bruno Mars was born Peter Gene Hernandez. And who can blame Reginald Kenneth Dwight for wanting people to call him Elton John? But here's a better example, one more like the pseudonymity that we're talking about, Banksy. Everybody knows who Banksy is, and nobody knows who Banksy is. People recognize and know his work and style. His work is incredibly valuable if you can verify that it's actually from him. Could you dig up Banksy's real-world name? Maybe. Do you want to do that? Probably not. Not knowing his real-world identity is better. It's better for him, it's better for the art, it's better for the audience. Side note, I remember seeing Banksy's documentary Exit Through the Gift Shop at the Sundance Film Festival in 2010. Loved the movie, and then a Banksy showed up right outside the theater. Maybe he was in the screening I was at. I don't know. And in 2018, I was in Paris working with a crypto startup when Banksy work started popping up around the city, and me and the people I was working with rode bikes around the city in the middle of the night, like 2, 3 a.m., trying to find these Banksys before they got removed or defaced. It was crazy times. It was a lot of fun. And if you like Banksy, you should check out Schlom's, an anonymous NFT artist who is very cool. Anyway, back to the point, Banksy has, unsurprisingly, talked about identity before. He said, "I don't know why people are so keen to put the details of their private life in public. They forget that invisibility is a superpower." He's right. Controlling your identity, who knows what about you, is a superpower. Superheroes famously conceal their real-world identity to protect themselves and their loved ones. This is the issue with online privacy. When somebody knows everything about you, they have power over you, regardless of whether you've done anything wrong or not. And if people or governments know nothing about you, they likely have no power over you. I've talked about Balaji Srinivasan before on this channel, and let's be honest, this may as well be a Balaji stan channel. I mean, the guy can read the tea leaves like nobody else. He was correct and very early on cryptocurrency, founding 21.co, later Earn.com, acquired by Coinbase in 2018, where he then became the CTO for a time. In early 2020, he was also one of the earliest to recognize the COVID pandemic as a serious threat to the world and not a regional problem in China. He was outspoken about this while basically being laughed at by major press outlets. In certain circles on Twitter, there's a meme. The scariest phrase in the English language is, "Balaji was right." You might not like what he's saying, but it's important to listen and consider. The guy has a history of seeing the future before other people. So, what is Balaji talking about now? Online identity, anonymity, and specifically pseudonymity. There's a talk Balaji has given several times in the last couple years called the Pseudonymous Economy. In this talk, Balaji discusses why we would want a pseudonymous economy and how we might build one. Balaji says that pseudonymity is just as important as decentralization, and the archetypal example he offers is none other than Satoshi Nakamoto himself, the inventor of Bitcoin. Who is Satoshi? We don't know. And because we don't know, the detractors of Bitcoin can't attack the inventor. They can't jail him or kill him. And because he was so careful, they can't even dox him. The only thing the critics and governments can contend with is the actual technology he built. It really focuses the conversation in an incredible way. Another point Balaji makes, pseudonymity is already mainstream, but by its nature, it's less talked about. Most people who have an online pseudonym don't go around announcing it publicly, or they're very selective about what they share. Maybe they have a dozen pseudonyms, but they're not going to broadcast that fact. And this is standard for younger people, for Zoomers. They may not remember the pseudonymous web of the late 90s and early 2000s, but they know that Facebook sucks. And who in their right mind would speak their whole mind on Twitter of all places? The mob will come after you. And this gets back to to my original point. Whatever your political views, it's become more and more clear that there are serious personal perils to people found disagreeing with the internet mob. If sufficiently many people online collectively decide that they deeply dislike you for whatever reason, there are very straightforward ways for them to attack, like going after employment or harassing or swatting or more. And if the mob comes after you, your employer, your associates, your neighbors, even your family, anybody around you, they may try to distance themselves lest they incur the wrath of that same mob. But what if the identity wasn't known? What if it was split up? What if that person has one identity for one area of their lives and they have another identity for another area? They take their whole self, they break it up into pieces, and they keep them hidden and tucked away, air-gapped from each other. They basically make, for lack of a better word, a Horcrux. Maybe Voldemort was onto something. I mean, spoiler, it did take 7 long books and 8 movies to finally kill the guy. Importantly, Balaji points out that people today can get paid for pseudonymous work. This likely was not possible in the past. Yes, you could maybe be an author getting paid without a real name attached on the byline, but your employer would know who you were. They would know your real-world identity. With cryptocurrency and the advent of zero-knowledge proofs, it's possible to work and get paid pseudonymously, where the employer doesn't even know the real-world identity of the person doing the work. Square began doing this with a developer in 2019, and DAOs are doing this too. Balaji also has some interesting ideas on how to bring over verified information from a real-world identity to a pseudonymous identity without giving up the whole identity. Maybe there's a way to indicate that somebody uses a pseudonym, but to also verify that they're a board-certified doctor, or they're a Twitter blue check, or they have over 100,000 followers on their main account. I'm spitballing, but technologically, there are ways to do this. Another aspect of this, technologies like MetaHuman from Unreal Engine, or deepfakes, or voice synthesis technology may allow people to create fully animate, talking avatars that bear no resemblance to the person behind the mask. Talk to your colleagues, conduct interviews, whatever you like, and keep it all pseudonymous. This is a sprawling, mind-bending topic, and I really want to spend more time with it, but this is plenty for an intro video to chew on. What do you guys think? Is it time for us to make Horcruxes with our identities? Have you already started? Are there tools that you're using to manage your identity or projects addressing this problem? Let me know down in the comments, and we'll discuss it again in a future video. Thanks, team.